Okay, just a quick video today. I wanted to kind of help answer a question that came up in the iRacing support channel, specifically around units for channels, or if you will, data fields in Pi Toolbox. This isn't unique to iRacing. This really goes for, Cosworth Pi Toolbox in general. But if you're coming from other platforms, it may be a little confusing to understand how to change the units. And then there's a couple of interesting capabilities that you could change units in places and maybe trip over it later if you don't realize that there's ways of doing it per display. So I'm just going to walk you through this real quick, just so you can see how to change it. So we've got here in front of us Toolbox 14. This is the iRacing workbook that Cosworth provides, and I've just opened up an outing. So I kind of joked about this in the first video I did on this. The units are all in metric units. Internally, I'm told that Pi Toolbox data files are always normalized to SI units. So you might see that by default. But here you can see, for me, speed is in, kilometers per hour. I like to think in miles per hour. So the first thing I want to do is change that. So there's a couple places to change it, a couple different ways to change it. The simplest and most straightforward one is through what we call the global channels properties. So over here on the left, there's this pane is super important for configuring things. And you'll learn there's hotkeys that make it really easy to cycle through it. But at first we can just use these arrow keys and just cycle through different things. And you'll see here global channel properties. I'm going to come back to that. Display channel properties, we'll talk about that in a second. Global event properties, display properties, there's different things, metrics. So from a hotkey perspective, if at any time we just want to change a channel, Alt-3 is your friend. So Alt-3 will take you right to your global channel properties. If you hit Alt-3 a second time, it'll do display channel properties, and you can just kind of toggle between these with Alt-3. If all we want to do is globally change speed to mile per hour, super simple. Go down here in your channel list. In fact, let's just use the filter function and just type SP, and there is speed. And then below, these are all your channel properties. And so the thing we care about here is the unit. So if I scroll down, you'll see unit is kilometer per hour. I'll go ahead and change that to miles per hour. And just like that, you can see it change on my display. Everything through the workbook will change to that, that unit. Now, I mentioned that you can change things per display. So a good example is, for me, I tend to think of length in terms of inches and feet. Unless you're dealing with shock travel, for me, I tend to think in terms of millimeters, just because fractions of an inch make my head hurt. So I'm going to show you an example here where, in this case, maybe in this display only, I want it to be in kilometers per hour. I don't have a shock graph in front of me, or else I'd try to do it with shock graphs. But all I got to do here is I click on the display I want to change. And then again, I can use Alt-3 to where I see display channel properties. So now I'm going to take this filter off. So I just got to delete that. What you see on the left here are all the channels in that display. And I can click on one of them and change it just for that display. So let's say for this display only, I want the speed to be in feet per second. Okay, so now I've changed it just for this display, but if I go to another display, like let's try driver braking data, you'll see speed is still in miles per hour. So that way, if for some reason you want to have a different unit in a specific display, you can change that. But the thing to keep in mind here is if I change the global property again, so if you go back to what we did a minute ago, go back to global properties, go back down to speed, and I now change the global properties back to kilometers per hour. Okay, so it's changed over here to kph. Over here, it's still feet per second. Okay, so I say this because you may be beating your head against the wall trying to figure out why, if you change something globally, my display is not changing. It usually means you tailored something just in that specific display. Now, if you want to get that display so it's no longer tailored, there's a way to do that. So I'm going to go back to display properties for my display right here where I've customized it to feet per second. Again, I'm going to do Alt-3 to get to channel properties. And again, I'm just going to remove this filter just so you can see all the channels. So I want you to notice that in this case, 2 of my channels, they have this little diamond icon next to them. And what that means is I've changed the properties on that channel. Could be units, could be whether it's auto-scaled or not, but something has changed from the global properties. So if I want to go back to the global settings, I just right-click and I do revert. And so now I'm back to my global settings, which in this case were KPH. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to figure out why things aren't changing, or again, if you want to just change things globally, it's an easy way to do that. And then since we're talking about units, I'll just bring up one more thing for when you are working on math channels. So one of the cool things about Toolbox is, unlike other platforms where a lot of times you have to kind of add in multipliers because one thing is in feet per second and another thing is meters per second, or one's mile per hour and one's in G. You can do this really easily in Pi Toolbox math channels. So a good example that came up recently, let's just take the ride height one. So here, ride height is natively in meters. But for the purposes of this channel, we wanted in millimeters. So the left and right ride height channel, we've just basically told Toolbox, hey, convert those to millimeters for me, because ordinarily they'd be meters. And then I want my output to be millimeters. And so by doing this, I don't have to do the math of saying, well, ride height's normally in meters, so I need to divide by whatever. It'll just do it for me. And that's super handy when you're also doing things that are a little more complicated, like radians to degrees and that sort of thing. So just want to show you a little bit about units and how they work on channels in Pi Toolbox. Hope you find this helpful. Keep the questions coming over in the support channel. I'm really enjoying just kind of answering questions, and where it makes sense, give you a quick video overview. So have a good evening. Thanks.